Zola Mbeki had almost forgotten what it felt like to receive a message from her family. For years, she had lived with distance between them. Not just physical distance, but the kind of silence that grows when people you love stop making an effort to understand you. She had learned to stop waiting for calls, stop expecting apologies, and stop hoping that one day things would go back to the way they were. So when her phone lit up one quiet evening, and she saw her mother's name on the screen, she froze. It was an invitation. Family party. For a few seconds, Zola just stared at the message. Her first reaction was confusion. After everything that happened, why would they suddenly want her there? She read the words again and again. Maybe they finally want to fix things, she whispered to herself. A small part of her heart wanted to believe that. Maybe her parents, Thabo and Naledi Mbeki, finally realized how much they had hurt her. Maybe this was their way of opening the door again. Maybe they missed their daughter. For the first time in years, Zola allowed herself to feel a little hope. She decided to go. She chose a beautiful dress, something elegant but simple. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she smiled softly. She wasn't going there to prove anything. She wasn't going there to fight. She was going because deep down she still wanted to believe that family mattered. When she arrived at the party, the house was filled with lights, music, and people. Everyone looked happy. Everyone seemed excited to see her. But Zola didn't know the truth yet. The smiles were not because they missed her. The invitation was not because they wanted to heal old wounds. She thought she was walking into a celebration, but she had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. For as long as Zola Mbeki could remember, she always felt like she was standing in someone else's shadow. In her own family, she was never the daughter everyone celebrated. That place always belonged to her sister Ayana. Ayana was the one their parents talked about with pride. She was the perfect daughter. Every achievement she had was announced like a family victory. Every mistake she made was quickly forgiven. But Zola was different. She was the daughter who stayed quiet. The daughter who worked hard without expecting applause. The daughter who noticed when her parents needed help and stepped forward, even when nobody noticed her sacrifices. Growing up, Zola learned something painful. Sometimes the person who gives the most love is the person who receives the least appreciation. While Ayana got support for her dreams, Zola had to fight for everything. She worked after school, saved her own money, and gave up many things she wanted because she believed family came first. There were moments when Zola had dreams of her own. She wanted to build something, create something, and become someone she could be proud of. But every time she talked about her future, someone would remind her of Ayana. "Your sister knows how to make the right choices," her father Thabo would say. "Maybe you should learn from her," her mother Naledi would add. Those words stayed with Zola for years. She never understood why her efforts were invisible. When the family faced problems, Zola was always the first person they called. If bills needed help, she found a way. If someone needed support, she showed up. But when things got better, she was forgotten. She was useful when they needed her, but never valued when they didn't. One memory always stayed with her. Years ago, when her family was going through a difficult time, Zola put aside her own plans to help them. She worked harder, sacrificed her own comfort, and stood beside them when everything felt impossible. She thought that moment would finally make them see her. She thought they would finally say, "Zola, we are proud of you." But instead they simply moved on. No thank you. No appreciation. No recognition. Meanwhile, Ayana could make one small achievement, and the whole family would celebrate. Zola smiled through it all, but inside, she carried a pain nobody knew about. She wasn't angry because Ayana was loved. She was hurt because she wanted to feel loved too. For years, Zola kept proving herself to people who had already decided not to see her. But what her family didn't know was that all those lonely nights, all those sacrifices, and all those moments when she felt invisible were quietly building the person she would become. They thought Zola was the daughter who couldn't measure up. They had no idea she was becoming the woman they would one day regret underestimating. When Zola walked into the party, she immediately noticed how different everything felt. The house was filled with beautiful decorations, expensive clothes, and people laughing around the room. Family, friends, relatives, and guests were everywhere. Soft music played in the background, and everyone looked like they were enjoying a perfect evening. For a moment, Zola felt relieved. She saw her parents smiling at her. Her mother Naledi walked toward her with a warm expression. Her father Tabo greeted her like everything between them was normal. Even Ayana hugged her and smiled. It almost felt like the past never happened. Zola looked around and thought, maybe this is really a new beginning. Maybe her family finally wanted peace. Maybe they finally understood her. She smiled back, not knowing that every smile around her was hiding something. After everyone finished eating, Tabo stood up and tapped his glass. The room slowly became quiet. "Everyone, I want to say something tonight," he announced. Zola looked at him, expecting kind words. She thought maybe her father would say he was proud of her. Maybe he would talk about how much he missed having his daughter close. But the next words made her heart sink. "Tonight is a special night because we are celebrating family, and also remembering how far everyone has come." People smiled and listened. Then Tabo looked directly at Zola. "And some people have had a very interesting journey," he said with a small laugh. Zola's smile slowly faded. The room became quieter. Her father started talking about her past struggles. He mentioned the years when she was struggling, the jobs she had taken, and the difficult moments she had gone through. But he wasn't saying it with love. He was making it sound like a joke. "You all remember when Zola thought she was going to change the world?" Tabo laughed. "She had so many dreams back then." A few people forced a small laugh. Zola stood there silently. Every word felt heavier than the last. He continued telling stories about her failures as if they were funny memories. He talked about the time she had no money, the time she needed help, and the moments when life was difficult for her. But he never mentioned the sacrifices she made. He never mentioned how she helped the family. He never mentioned the nights she stayed awake working while everyone else rested. The guests started noticing the uncomfortable atmosphere. Some people stopped smiling. Others looked away, not knowing where to look. They came expecting a family celebration. They didn't expect to watch a daughter being embarrassed in front of everyone. Zola looked around the room and realized the truth. This wasn't a party to welcome her back. This was a stage. And her family had invited her there to make her the entertainment. But what they didn't know was that the woman they were laughing at was no longer the same girl they had looked down on years ago. The room became completely quiet after Tabo finished talking about Zola's past. Everyone was looking at her. Some people looked curious. Some looked uncomfortable. And some looked like they were enjoying the moment. Zola stood there holding her glass, trying to stay calm. She had walked into this house with hope in her heart. She thought this night was about fixing broken relationships. She thought her family finally wanted to make things right. But now she understood. They didn't invite her because they missed her. They invited her because they wanted a story to tell. A story where they could laugh at her. Then her mother Naledi stepped forward with a smile on her face. But her words carried no kindness. "You know," Naledi said, looking around at the guests, "some people never become successful no matter how hard they try." A few people became uncomfortable immediately. They knew exactly who she was talking about. Zola felt the words hit her harder than she expected. She remembered all those years when she worked quietly, the sacrifices she made, the time she put her own dreams aside for her family. And now the same people she supported were standing in front of everyone, making her feel small. Naledi continued. "Sometimes people spend their whole lives chasing dreams that were never meant for them." The room became even more silent. Nobody laughed this time. Even the guests who had been smiling earlier started looking away. Then Ayana stepped closer. Her sister had always been the one everyone praised. The one who was treated like she could do no wrong. Ayana looked at Zola and gave a small laugh. "Well," she said, "at least you finally showed up." Her words sounded simple, but everyone understood the meaning behind them. It wasn't a welcome. It was an insult. It was like Ayana was reminding Zola that she was the forgotten one. The one they never expected to succeed. The one they thought would always be behind. Zola looked at her family's faces. Her father, her mother, her sister. The people she had spent years trying to make proud. And for the first time she saw them clearly. They weren't trying to reconnect with her. They were trying to prove something. They wanted everyone in that room to see Zola as the daughter who failed. But what they didn't realize was that the guests were seeing something completely different. They were seeing a woman standing alone while her own family tried to break her. They were seeing someone who stayed calm even when she was being humiliated. A few guests exchanged looks. They understood now. This wasn't a family celebration. This was planned. Zola had not been invited to share their happiness. She had been invited to become their joke. And while everyone waited for her to react, Zola simply stood there quietly. Because they had no idea what she had been building in silence. They had no idea that the same woman they were trying to embarrass had a truth that would change everything in that room. Zola stood there in the middle of the room, listening to every word. Jokes, comments, the way her family talked about her like she was someone who never became anything. But she didn't fight back. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try to explain herself. She just smiled softly and stayed quiet. Everyone in that room thought her silence meant she had nothing to say. They thought she was embarrassed because they were right about her. But they were wrong. Very wrong. What nobody knew was that Zola's life had changed completely after she walked away from her family. While they were busy judging her, she was busy building herself. Those years when they thought she was struggling were actually the years when she was creating something powerful. She started small, with no support, no family connections, no one cheering for her, just her own determination. There were nights when she worked until the sun came up. There were moments when she doubted herself. There were times when she wanted to give up. But every time she remembered how invisible she felt in her own family, she pushed harder. Slowly everything changed. The small idea she started working on became a real company. A company that grew beyond anything she imagined. She made smart decisions, surrounded herself with the right people, and learned from every mistake. Over the years, Zola built successful businesses and made important investments. People who once ignored her started respecting her. People who never believed in her started wanting to work with her. She created powerful connections, but she never forgot where she came from. The interesting part was that her own family had no idea. They still saw the old Zola, the girl who struggled, the girl who needed help, the girl they believed would never succeed. They had no idea that the person standing in front of them was someone completely different. Zola had chosen to live simply, not because she couldn't afford a different life, but because she didn't want to become someone who needed to prove her worth through money or status. And maybe a small part of her also wanted to see if her family would love her without knowing what she had achieved. Would they respect her if she wasn't successful? Would they be proud of her if she had nothing to offer? The answer was standing right in front of her. They didn't see her value. They only saw what they believed she lacked. As her family continued talking, Zola looked around the room calmly. They were celebrating her past failures. But they had no idea they were standing next to her future success. Her father thought he was showing everyone who Zola was. Her mother thought she was proving a point. Ayana thought she had won. But none of them knew the truth. The woman they were trying to embarrass had already built a life they could never take away from her. And soon, everyone in that room was going to find out. For several minutes, Zola stood quietly while her family continued talking about her like she wasn't even standing there. She listened as they laughed. She listened as they remembered only the difficult moments of her life. Not the sacrifices. Not the hard work. Not the time she was there when nobody else was. Just the moments they could use to make themselves look better. Zola looked around the room one more time. She saw the guests watching her. Some looked sorry for her. Some looked shocked. And some looked disappointed in the people who were supposed to love her. Then Tabo sighed and looked at her. "Maybe you should leave now," he said. His voice was calm, but his words were clear. He didn't want her there anymore. The same father who once called her his daughter was now asking her to walk away in front of everyone. A few years ago, those words would have broken her. She would have cried. She would have tried to explain herself. She would have begged them to understand her. But tonight was different. Zola had already survived the moments when nobody believed in her. She had already learned how to stand alone. She slowly placed her glass on the table. Everyone expected her to quietly leave. But instead, Zola took a small step forward. The room became silent. Her family looked surprised. For the first time that night, Zola wasn't the quiet daughter standing in the corner. She looked confident. She looked peaceful. She looked like someone who finally knew her own worth. She looked at her father and spoke softly. "You invited me here to show everyone my failures." Her voice was calm, but every person in the room heard her. "But you forgot to ask what I built after you stopped believing in me." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire room went completely silent. Tabo's expression changed. Naledi stopped smiling. Anna looked confused. They weren't expecting this. They were expecting anger. They were expecting tears. They were expecting the old Zola who would stay quiet and accept their words. But that Zola was gone. Zola continued. "For years, you only saw the things I didn't have. You saw my struggles. You saw my mistakes. You saw the moments when life was difficult." She looked around at everyone. "But you never saw the nights I worked. You never saw the sacrifices I made. You never saw the things I built when nobody was watching." The guests listened carefully. Every word carried the pain she had been holding for years. "I didn't need this party to prove who I am," Zola said. "I came here because I thought my family finally wanted me back." Her voice became softer. "But now I understand why I was invited." No one had anything to say, because deep down they knew she was right. Zola looked at her family one last time. "You wanted everyone here to see the girl you thought failed." He paused. "But you forgot something." The room waited. The person you were trying to embarrass had already become someone you never expected. And for the first time that night, nobody laughed. Nobody made a joke. Because everyone in that room realized something. They weren't watching Zola fall. They were watching Zola finally stand. After Zola finished speaking, nobody knew what to say. The same people who were laughing moments ago were now sitting in complete silence. Tabo looked uncomfortable. Naledi avoided looking at her. Ayana's smile had disappeared. For years, they had believed they knew exactly who Zola was. They thought she was the daughter who struggled. The daughter who never reached her dreams. The daughter who needed to prove herself. But now, for the first time, they started wondering if they were wrong. Zola stood calmly in the middle of the room. She wasn't angry. She wasn't trying to hurt them. She didn't need revenge. She only needed them to see the truth. Then her phone suddenly vibrated. A notification appeared on the screen. Zola looked down. It was a message from her business team. For a moment, a small smile appeared on her face. She opened the message. "Congratulations, Zola. The deal has officially been completed. Your company has secured the biggest partnership in its history." Her eyes moved across the screen. This was the moment she had worked for. The moment she had sacrificed years for. The moment nobody in her family ever knew about. A few guests noticed the message on her face. "What happened?" someone asked. Zola looked up calmly. She didn't want to announce anything. She wasn't there to show off, but life had a way of revealing the truth at the perfect moment. One of the guests, who had been watching everything, stepped closer. "Is everything okay?" Zola smiled slightly. "Yes," she said. "Actually, it's more than okay." The room became curious. Zola looked at her phone again. "My company just completed a major deal." The guests looked surprised. "A company?" someone asked. Zola nodded. "Yes, the company I built." Those words changed everything. The room went quiet again. But this silence was different. Before, they were silent because they were watching her being embarrassed. Now they were silent because they were shocked. Tabo looked at her. "What company?" For the first time that night, Zola saw something in his eyes. Not pride. Not happiness. Surprise. She answered calmly. "The company I started when I had nothing. The one I built while everyone thought I was failing." Nobody knew what to say. The people who had laughed at her were now realizing the truth. The daughter they called unsuccessful had created something bigger than anyone imagined. The girl they underestimated had become a successful businesswoman. The person they were trying to embarrass was actually the person everyone else respected. Ayana looked at Zola differently now. She remembered all those years when she thought she was ahead. She remembered every time she laughed at Zola's dreams. But now the reality was impossible to ignore. Zola had never been behind. She had simply been building quietly. The guests started whispering among themselves. They weren't talking about Zola's failures anymore. They were talking about her success. They were talking about the woman standing in front of them. And for the first time, her family saw the truth. They didn't lose the daughter who couldn't succeed. They lost the daughter who became everything they never expected. The atmosphere in the room completely changed. A few minutes ago, Zola was the person everyone was laughing at. Now she was the person everyone wanted to talk to. The same guests who looked away when her family insulted her were now looking at her with respect. And her family noticed. Tabo's attitude changed first. The confidence he had while making jokes about her was gone. He looked at Zola differently. Not like a daughter he could criticize, but like someone he suddenly realized he underestimated. He walked closer with a soft smile. "Zola," he said, "I think maybe we never really understood you." She looked at him quietly. Then he added, "You always were special." Those words should have made her happy. Years ago, she dreamed of hearing those exact words from her father. She wanted him to see her. She wanted him to believe in her. But hearing it now felt different, because she knew why he was saying it. Not because he finally understood her heart, because he finally saw her success. Then her mother stepped forward. Her voice was much softer than before. "We are proud of you," Naledi said. The woman who once told her that some people never become successful was now telling her how proud she was. The change was so sudden that everyone in the room noticed. Ayana also changed her attitude. She no longer laughed. She no longer looked down on Zola. Instead, she tried to smile like they were always close. "Zola, we always knew you had something special," Ayana said. But Zola just stood there silently. 'Cause she remembered. She remembered the years when she needed them the most. She remembered coming home exhausted after working all day. She remembered having dreams but feeling alone. She remembered the moments when she wanted someone to say, "I believe in you," but nobody did. When she needed encouragement, they compared her. When she needed support, they judged her. When she needed her family to stand beside her, they made her feel like she was standing alone. They never saw the late nights. They never saw the sacrifices. They never saw the pain behind her silence. Now they were celebrating the result, but they ignored the journey. Zola looked at her parents and realized something painful. They were proud of the woman she became, but they were not proud of the girl who was trying to become her. And that difference mattered. She smiled politely. "I appreciate that," she said. Her voice was calm. "But I wish I heard those words when I was struggling, not only when I succeeded." The room became quiet again, because everyone knew she was telling the truth. Success had changed how they treated her. But success was never the reason Zola deserved love. She deserved it when she had nothing. She deserved it when she was still finding her way. And now, standing in that room, Zola finally understood. She didn't need their approval anymore. The person she had been waiting for them to believe in was the person she had already become. After the truth came out, everyone expected something from Zola. They expected her to be angry. They expected her to remind her family of every painful moment. They expected her to say something that would make them feel the same humiliation they had made her feel. Even her family seemed ready for a confrontation. Tabo looked nervous. Naledi looked like she wanted to explain herself. Ayana stayed quiet, waiting for Zola to say something. But Zola didn't do what they expected. She didn't shout. She didn't insult them back. She didn't try to hurt them. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked at the people who had once made her feel like she wasn't enough. The people she spent years trying to impress. The people she wanted to be proud of her. And then she smiled. Peaceful smile. "I know what you all expected from me tonight," Zola said softly. Everyone listened. "You expected me to be angry. You expected me to remind you of everything you did." Her eyes moved toward her parents. "And honestly, I could." The room became quiet. "Because I remember everything." She remembered the times she needed their support. She remembered the moments she needed someone to believe in her. She remembered feeling alone even while surrounded by family. "But I don't want to spend my life carrying that pain," Zola continued. Her voice was calm, not because she forgot, but because she had healed. "I don't need revenge." He paused. "My life is already the answer." Those words hit harder than any angry speech could have. Her family looked at her silently, 'cause they realized something. They had been waiting for Zola to prove herself, but she wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She already knew who she was. Tabo stepped forward. "Zola, we really are sorry." Naledi nodded. "We should have supported you more." For a moment, Zola looked at them. A part of her still wished she had heard those words years ago, when she was struggling, when she was working hard, when she was trying to find her place in the world. But timing mattered. Some apologies come after the damage is already done. "I appreciate you saying that," Zola replied. "But I spent too many years waiting for people to see my value." She looked around the room. "Now I know my value without needing anyone else to see it." Nobody had an answer. 'Cause she was right. Zola picked up her bag and prepared to leave. The same way she entered the party with hope, she was leaving with peace. Her family watched her walk toward the door. They thought success would bring them closer. But they forgot something important. Success was never what made Zola valuable. It only revealed what was already there. Before leaving, Zola turned around one last time. "I truly hope you all find happiness," she said. And then she walked away. No anger. No drama. No need to prove anything. Just dignity. As the door closed behind her, her family stood there in silence. Because the daughter they tried to embarrass had just shown them the strongest response of all. She didn't need to destroy them. She simply showed them that they could no longer affect the life she had built. Months passed after that unforgettable night. Life moved forward, but everything had changed. Zola was no longer the woman who walked into a family party hoping to be accepted. She was now the woman who had finally accepted herself. Inside the headquarters of her company, Zola stood by the large glass window, looking at the city below. The same woman her family once called unsuccessful was now leading a company that inspired thousands of people. Her office was filled with awards, achievements, and memories of the journey she had survived. But the thing she valued most wasn't the success. It was the peace. For the first time in her life, Zola didn't feel the need to prove anything. She was happy. She was surrounded by people who respected her, believed in her, and saw her worth from the beginning. She had built a life based on hard work, patience, and courage. A life nobody could take away from her. Meanwhile, her family had changed too. They often looked back at that night and remembered the moment they lost the daughter who always cared about them. They remembered every time Zola helped them, every time she stood beside them, every time she tried to make them proud. And they finally understood something painful. They didn't lose a daughter because she walked away. They lost her because they never truly saw her while she was there. They thought they were embarrassing a girl who had failed, but they were actually standing in front of a woman who was becoming a leader. They thought they were proving she wasn't enough, but they only revealed that they were the ones who failed, because the person they ignored was the person who had the biggest future. Zola never needed revenge. Her success was not about making them regret their actions. It was about creating a life where she could finally breathe, a life where she was loved, a life where she was respected. And years later, when people asked her about that family party, Zola simply smiled, because she knew the truth. My family invited me to their party just to humiliate me, but they forgot one thing. The person they were trying to embarrass had already built a life they could never destroy.